What's going on, ladies and gentlemen of our Luka Nation Network community? We have an awesome episode. This is Scouts episode number 3, and we've gotten amazing feedback so far. And guys, we're just testing here and already to get the feedback that we've gotten from some of you, the comments, the DMs, the topics that you want us to cover. It's super, super helpful, and we're really excited to keep this show going. You know, we have 4 topics to discuss with you guys today, and we're going to get into them in just a second here. But you know what's cool? We are at the exact same moment as when the bubble started last year. 10 games left in the season. 10 games left in the season. Tons of storylines. You know, who's going to make it to the finals? Nets, Lakers, Clippers. You got those big dogs. But then you also got the little teams, right? The teams that were below 500 fighting for that 10th seed, that 11th seed, that play-in game. The 9th and 10th seed, the 11th seed's eliminated. Yep. So we have our 4 topics. You could get into them in a second, Conrad.
For sure.
Anything top of mind? Anything, before we get into the topics that you want to say about the NBA season?
Very much. Because before we did talk about how even the Eastern Conference was, and I just saw this graphic today, like literally just an hour or so ago. The first episode, we talked about how the 4th through 10th seed were only separated by a few games. This season, I think I just saw right now the 7th and through 10th seed, which is all the play-in tournament teams in the Western Conference, are only separated by 1.5 games. Those teams being, I believe, the Blazers, Grizzlies, Warriors, and Spurs. Not in that order, but I think actually close to it. I think the Warriors are a 10th seed and the Spurs are a 9th seed. So we could get some pretty exciting games, these last couple weeks of the NBA season that really dictate how the playoffs are going to go for each conference. It's very exciting to say the least. I'm super hyped up for playoff basketball.
So our 4 topics, we're going to prepare topics from the previous week in the NBA. The 4 topics today are Brooklyn Nets, and you don't even know if they're real or not, right? They're injured, but you see KD come back, and that was it looked like a high school game versus a JV game, like the Nets versus the Suns yesterday. And the Suns are incredible, too. They're a very good team, deep team. KD comes back from an injury and just dominates. It was incredible. We'll talk about that. Wizards, I believe they're on an 8-game winning streak, maybe a 7-game winning streak.
Now it's stretched out to, I think, 11 or something ridiculous like that.
They're 8-game winning streak and 9-1 in their last 10.
That's it.
I think 10-1 in their last 11. So super impressive. Now they're in the 10th spot. It's 10th spot, and they might be they're 3 games out of the 8th. So that's another. Yeah. Lakers. AD comes back, but he doesn't look good. So where do they play out? Are they going to finish with a 7 or 8 seed? Or are they going to be a 1, 2, 3 seed? And lastly, Steph Curry. Conrad said, "Man is unreal." That's the text that he sent me. What should we expect with him next year? And him this year or his unanimous MVP season?
Yeah.
So let's start with that topic because you just talked about it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So overall, I mean, come on, Steph has been absolutely unbelievable. I think it was 83. He hit 83 3-pointers in the month of April, which is ridiculous to say the least. And I mean, considering that the month isn't even over yet, that's just absolutely insane, right? And he's playing some of the best basketball that we've seen him play individually. And there's been people talking about, would you take 2021 Steph Curry versus this year of this player, this year this player? I kind of just want to compare him to the 2016 unanimous MVP season for a couple of reasons. So let's take a little bit of a look into it. So 2016, he was more efficient from the field and from 3, shooting 45% from 3-point range, which is a very important note. It's ridiculous
disgusting
efficiency. Yes, exactly. It's
also think about how many threes he shoots. This isn't like a big man that shoots half a 3 a game.
I think it was 5.1 3-point attempts per game on 45% efficiency. That's insane. More assists per game, more steals per game. More blocks, but it was only by 0.1 blocks per game. So, I mean, it doesn't really count that much.
Did you see his block last night? I
didn't actually. I should have watched it.
It was kind of a game-saving block. I think it was on Rashawn Holmes or something. He came up a little gimpy, but he pinned it against the backboard. It was incredible.
Always great to see him do that because he's not exactly the best defensive player or the most athletic player either, to say the least. So I'm sure that was pretty great to see. He led the league in points per game, steals per game, and free throw percentage. And then, of course, best regular season team of all time with a 73-9 record, right? Now, in 2021, he's averaging more points per game with 31.2 points per game, which is ridiculous. He's also got more quote-unquote rebounds, but it's only by 0.2, similar to the blocks. Not exactly like a significant margin, so I don't really count it. More efficient from free throw range, and then, of course, leads the league in points per game. Now, I think it's kind of obvious that the 2016 unanimous MVP version of him is definitely the better player. Although I would also say that, obviously this year he's got a worse supporting cast. So it would be interesting to see him with that 73-9 Warriors supporting cast with the way he's playing now. But I think that it's just kind of proof of how ridiculous and how great that NBA season, that MVP season was for Steph Curry. That is like an unbelievable year. I mean, leading the league in 3 categories by a wide margin, like ridiculous efficiency from 3, 73-9 record. Like, that's unbelievable. Unanimous MVP. I just think that it really, comparing these 2 years really shows the magnitude of that MVP season, at least in my opinion, and just how great that year was for Steph Curry. Because, I mean, you can see how much we're talking about him now and how we're talking about, oh my gosh, some of the best basketball he's ever played. This is unbelievable. And it's not even really his best season, which is kind of crazy to say the least. I just wanted to point that out. Yes, it's very crazy.
I would say the 2015-2016 season is historic because it changed the game. I think that was the flip when I was like, because think about it. I mean, you had Wilt Chamberlain, you had Michael Jordan, you had Shaquille O'Neal, you had guys that dominated, and they didn't even get unanimous MVPs, right?
Nope.
So here's this Curry guy comes out and just chucks threes, makes 45% on 11 attempts a game, 5 makes a game. And that's when I think the NBA changed a lot. That's when I think Dame Lillard, Trey, these guys started practicing shooting like Curry. So that season, but for me, he's more valuable this year. Because if I were to look at the Warriors roster, I think what makes Curry so special is how much better he makes his players around him. So I want to give Draymond a little credit here too, because Curry without Draymond doesn't perform as well. And if you look at the splits with Draymond on the court versus off, the thing about that is when Draymond's off the court, the defense just hones in on Curry. They double, triple team him, and no one else could play make and pass like Curry. Like Wiggins can't play make. Oubre doesn't play make. But when Curry's on the floor, he makes Wiggins better. He makes Oubre better. He gets them open looks. These guys are bum. Like, I'm just going to go. Wiggins is a bum. The guy can't play. He misses wide open layups. Did you see the layup he missed versus the Wizards?
I didn't, but I'm not surprised. It's Wiggins.
And he's able to take this team to potentially a playoff team. They've had some big wins. They're coming into stride, and they've dealt with some injuries this year. So as much as Curry was great in 15-16, I'm going to go this year. For me, this is his MVP season. But what's crazy, the MVP race this year is insane, right? So it's kind of like who would you pick? Right now, you have your vote. Who is your MVP to date?
I'd say Jokic because he's having one of, if not the greatest offensive season that we've seen in recent memory. I mean, of course, we've had other MVPs that were in contention, but they're finally like a top 4 seed in a heavily contested Western Conference. And he's playing phenomenally without his second option in Jamal Murray right now. Still, and they're still winning games, even though it's not quite as great as it was before he got injured. But I'd probably go Jokic. Then maybe Embiid and Curry are kind of tied for second place, but I'd probably lean more towards. Shoot, I don't even know who I'd lean more towards. I'd pick Jokic for sure at number 1, but I don't know who I'd put at number 2.
Does it sway your opinion that Curry beat Jokic the last 2 times they matched up?
Not at all.
I think
that's shocking. Like, I think it's great, but no, I still think Jokic is better because even if he's lost a couple of games here and there, I mean, the Warriors have lost 2 games to the Wizards recently. Does that change your opinion on the Wizards?
Let's go there. That was one of your topics, so we'll dovetail right into it. Before this season, I went on Lucas Tigers and Brown podcast, and I said to Cage, the Wizards are going to be a playoff team. I didn't I didn't show my face for the first half of the year because they were putrid. They were really bad. And they're still an incredibly bad team. If you kind of look at that roster and you take Beal and Westbrook off, that team is a JV team in I don't even know, like Texas. I don't even know why.
Yeah, it's bad.
They're not very good. But they are on a, 8-game winning streak. They're now in 10th place. What do you make of this Wizards team? Where do you see them? Two questions. How do you see them finishing the season? And if they get into the playoffs, are they dangerous?
Okay. Here's what I will say. First of all, there are two other teams that I would say are in contention with them as the 10th seed right now, and the Bulls and the Raptors. Bulls don't have a shot because Levine is out right now due to the virus protocols and stuff like that, right? So I doubt that the Bulls are actually going to make any sort of real run for a playoff spot. I think at this point they're just done for the year. The Raptors have just kind of sucked. I really don't know what to expect from them. I'm kind of just thinking that they're taking this year as like a step back and they're not going to try as hard. And one of the biggest reasons that continue.
They're traveling. Let's give them a break. They're not even playing from home.
I don't think that the Raptors are honestly as bad as their record may seem, and I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, they are terrible. They deserve to be shunned and stuff like that. Like, this isn't all their fault. They've dealt with some injuries. They've dealt with the virus as well. And of course, they're still playing in Tampa Bay instead of Toronto. Two very different climates, two very different places, right? Like, they don't have a single technically home game because they're not playing in Toronto, which is their home, right? So I'm not going to crap on the Raptors and give them crap before, a bad season this year. I don't care. It's not necessarily completely their fault. However, the Wizards recently, they've won a lot of games because Westbrook is playing a lot better than he was at the beginning of the year. And of course, Bradley Beal is still keeping up the same, if not better production than he was at the beginning of the year as well. But I don't think that this is a legitimately good team. And I know that sounds crazy, but listen, just hear me out. Their last 11 wins, here's who they played and who they beat. In order. So, at the start of the streak, Pistons, Magic, Jazz, Kings, Pelicans, Pistons, Thunder, Warriors, Thunder, and Cavs. Let's take a little bit more of a look into this. Pistons, pretty bad team. I would expect that. Magic,
below 500.
I would expect that, right? Both of them. I would also expect them to beat the Pistons again later on in the year. The Thunder, I would expect them to beat both times because they're tanking right now and they don't even have Shea. And then I would also expect them to beat the Cavs, right? So that's 6 of those 11 wins are all pretty much expected. But let's
below 500 teams.
Games. Exactly. But let's take a look at more of these games. Pelicans, they beat them only by 2 points in overtime with both Lonzo Ball and Zion Williamson getting relatively limited minutes considering how long they were playing. And when you really look at that, especially considering how bad the Pelicans are right now, not that impressive. I would honestly expect them to win at that point too. So there's 7 of those 11 wins you would definitely expect them to win. However, they did beat the Jazz, which was impressive. The Kings is a toss-up. I'm not necessarily going to say it was going either way. That's kind of an even matchup, honestly. I think that both teams are relatively on the same level this year.
The Kings are below 500 team. That's another one there.
They are, but the Kings are really inconsistent. They're either damn good or they're damn bad, and there's no in between, right? So I mean, it's a toss up. Just kind of depends on the night, right? I'm not gonna give the Wizards crap for beating a team that was just having an off night. No, I'm not gonna give them too much crap for that. Then they did beat the Warriors, which was impressive with a fully healthy roster and everything like that. And then they also beat the Warriors, but only by 3 points, which is it's not necessarily I expect them to beat the Warriors at that point, or only by 3, but. It's a little bit less of a win.
That was a contested game. That was a contested game. But you need to go watch the final minutes of that game because in the final minute, they do a great job full court pressing them, trapping them, and Westbrook throws the ball, turns it over. Wiggins gets a throw-ahead pass for a wide-open layup. It rims out. It rims out. But the Warriors would have tied that game up. But
exactly.
I'm with you.
They've won a lot of games that either were expected or were close games, or a lot of those wins during these past 11 wins that they've had, I'm not exactly shocked by personally. And so for that reason, I'm not expecting this team to be really dangerous whatsoever come playoff time. However, there's 10 games left in the season, or some. It depends on the team, obviously. Some teams have 11, some teams have 9. Doesn't really matter. But there's only a couple weeks left in the season. If they can finish out strong and they beat some really good teams this year towards the end of the season, maybe I'll give them the credit. And if they match up with Kevin Durant in the first round, the Brooklyn Nets, if they manage to sneak into the playoffs, I'm gonna love that series. I mean, first of all, but I'm not expecting the Wizards to beat them. However, Russell Westbrook revenge tour, maybe they pull it off, or maybe they take it to 7 games. And if they do, I would love that. I would personally love that, and maybe I gotta come up with some punishment for me for not believing in them, right? Maybe if they take it to 7 games or if they beat it, maybe I'll come up with a punishment after this, and we'll release it in the next episode. But yeah, I don't personally see it with this team, especially looking at their supporting cast and considering that Denny Avdia is now out, even though he wasn't a huge part of their rotation. I just don't expect them to do much.
Let's talk about that. What I think I've seen the last 8-10 games is they're ready for next year. If this is a roster that, if you look, they have the worst, number 3 to number 10 guy on that team. Outside of Westbrook and Beal, who do they have? I mean, Rui is a major disappointment. Denny Avdia, I mean, he's a rookie, so you can't really say much, but no one. There's not a single guy on that roster outside of Beal and Westbrook that is genuinely someone I would get excited about if I was a GM. Here's the thing. Going into next year, depending on Beal's health, Westbrook's health, this could be a really good team. You draft 1 or 2 kind of athletic guys. You bring in a few vets. I'm thinking like an Iguodala, Trevor Ariza, these guys that, they can defend. Danny Green, Seth Curry.
Bring in some defense.
Some defense and some 3-point shooting and some experience, some locker room culture. This is a team that's built to have some success next year. This year, you're absolutely right. I mean, if they match up with the Nets, they're going to get stomped because you can't just outscore someone. You can't just, if you're going to want to put up 150 with Bradley Beal and Westbrook, they need to put up 50 points.
You got to have a supporting cast.
You got to have a supporting cast, and they just don't. But I love what I'm seeing from Westbrook. I do agree. I love the revenge tour. And Beal, I mean, just in terms of a beautiful offensive game, man. The guy is so smooth. He could finish with either hand. I love watching Beal play.
I agree. I actually was just doing research for Should You Invest post, and I just kind of realized Bradley Beal and Devin Booker aren't too separated as far as play style goes. I'd say that Devin Booker has a much better handle on the ball, complicated handle as far as, crossover, spin moves between the legs, behind the back, whatever. But other than that, their shot selection is relatively similar. They're pretty efficient as far as regular efficiency goes. They can be good playmakers if they're put in that role. Although I would say that Bradley Beal's a better defender, but honestly, their play styles are very similar, and I never really realized it until now, until I did some more research. He does have a beautiful game. I 100% agree with you. I do want to just mention this, though, real quick. Just a question. If you are the Wizards, do you want to be solid next season, or do you just want to start a rebuild? Because, seriously, what's the ceiling?
If it was up to you, Conrad, every team would rebuild.
Not really.
That's because you're franchise mode, guys. Conrad is always on that 2K franchise mode. He picks the worst team and builds them up. So he wants if Conrad was a GM in the NBA, he would rebuild every year. He loves it.
I'd be OKC, but on steroids, basically. But in all seriousness, what's the ceiling with this team, right? What supporting cast can you put around them that makes them championship contenders? None. I say you got Rui Hachimura and Denny Avdia while they're relatively young. If you finally utilize Denny Avdia better than just a spot-up 3-point shooter, he can actually be a third option on a contender at his peak, maybe. I doubt that he actually gets to that point, but he can be a very good point forward, maybe off of your bench as a 6th man or something like that, rather than just sticking him in the corner, right? And I just don't think that this team is a high ceiling. You trade Bradley Beal while you can. I guess try to get rid of Russell Westbrook in a trade. I doubt that they can actually get major value back, but try to do it and start a rebuild, because this team does not have a high ceiling. They're not going to land any big-time free agents. They don't have enough assets to land a huge star in a trade, right? And, I mean, speaking of, there's not a ton of stars to trade for right now, so Who are you going to trade for? I just don't see it. I would personally start a rebuild in Washington.
Not even going to say that this is possible, but let's have some fun. If Anthony Davis were to somehow wind up in Washington, you laugh. No, but let's hypothetically throw that out.
Yeah, hypothetically, I understand.
Do you have enough there with Westbrook, Anthony Davis, and Bradley Beal?
Okay, are we saying like they made a trade and they had to give up some of their supporting cast, or are we just saying take this team, add Anthony Davis? That way it's not
Sure,
too
but I
complicated.
mean, their supporting cast, you could find better
Yeah.
free agents probably in the
I'm going to
offseason.
say with that team, you probably have enough to contend. I don't know if I would say they're a lock to win. I'd count them as a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, no doubt. It kind of just depends on their supporting cast, honestly, at that point. How good are their wing defenders? Do they have a nice center option for Anthony Davis because he doesn't want to play the 5 a ton due to injuries, stuff like that. But he does, of course, majorly improve this team. I think that he would make them a top 3 team in the Western Conference, or Eastern Conference, sorry, without a doubt. And that's kind of saying something because the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference are the Nets, the Sixers, and the Bucks. So I'm saying that they would probably be better than one of those teams, which is a bit shocking. Those are all very good
Let's
teams.
talk about the Bucks real quick. Talk about the Hawks and the Bucks. The Hawks supporting cast, I'm really impressed with them. They put out a really incredible. They put out a good win yesterday versus the Bucks. And when will the Bucks learn to run an offense? Guys, I want you to do this little exercise. This is going to be fun. I was showing my soccer buddy yesterday the difference between running an offense like the Warriors and running it like the Bucks. So I pull up a YouTube highlight of like how the Warriors run their offense, and there's like 20 passes. They get into the post, they pass out, they move it across the perimeter, pump fake, dribble penetration. Beautiful. Watch it. It's like poetry. And then you watch the Bucks. Giannis dribbles down the court, turns around, sets a screen, dribble handoff to Chris Middleton, shot. Next play, dribbles down the court, dribble handoff, shot. It's not going to work, Milwaukee. You've already seen it for 3 years. It's not going to work. Your dribble handoff, this isn't high school. Like, it's just not high school basketball. You need a little creativity in that offense to have any success.
I agree. And I do 100% agree with you, but I do want to say this. You cannot compare any team's offense to the Warriors' offense because that is just how great Steph Curry is. He can make any team look stupid. Their offense, how they run their offense, they can make them look stupid because of how great he is. He's constantly moving off ball, and almost no one else in the league does it as much as him, except for potentially like Klay Thompson, his own teammate.
Sure.
And that is why their offense is so great. He creates plays for teammates without even having the ball in his hands, because when he's running around the court, he's going to have like 2 defenders chasing him at all times, which is going to leave people open for shots or to drive in and attack the basket. And it's unbelievable. I think that just he's one of the greatest offensive talents of all time, if not top 3, if not the greatest. And I know that's kind of shocking to say, but he's unbelievable.
No question. Fine, let's take that.
Yeah.
But you're not going to win, Milwaukee. I don't care what your reason is. You're not going to win with this offense because, and this is where we get to the Nets. So the Nets are such a fascinating team. Here's what I'm seeing. I don't know what to expect. Then I watch the game versus the Suns, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Okay, Kyrie's putting up 30, but he's actually overshadowed by Durant. Durant, who just came off an Achilles injury last year. Then, what was his other injury? He sprained his ankle, I think, and now he had a quad contusion. Okay? First game back. This guy, crossover, 7'1", gets to the post, one-handed floater. Next possession, gets to the post again, off the backboard. Then next possession, step up three-pointer. This guy has been out for however long, doesn't skip a beat. This team is scary, man. And now you have Blake Griffin knocking down threes, playing good defense. Talk to me about James Harden. So I know they said his hamstring, he's out indefinitely. What are you hearing from the beat writers?
I heard that he's supposed to be expected to be out until May 11th, which is basically like the last couple games of the season, right? Like literally like the last week of the NBA season, which is a bit scary for this team. It could be worse, but they need him on this roster and they need him healthy in order to win this year. Although I wouldn't say, like, some people are expecting this team, like, it's like boom or bust. You have to win or it's over. Rebuild the team. Like, this is stupid. No, they have plenty of years left. Like, they still have James Harden under contract for another year. They have not Curry. They have Kyrie and KD locked down for a couple of years, right? Like, they're fine. They're fine. In fact, honestly, it's probably better if they, well, not necessarily better if they don't win a championship this year, but even if they don't, they still have an extra $12 million coming off the books when Spencer Dinwiddie leaves the team in free agency, which is most likely going to happen, right? So they can spend that on someone else to add to their roster, right? Which is going to make them even better than they are right now, which is insane. But it is a bit scary for them because he runs their offense. He's, I think, leading the league in assists this year. He's close to it. So, losing a guy like that is definitely a bit worrisome. But you got KD, you have Kyrie, you have Joe Harris working off balls, shooting basically 50% from three-point range on pretty high volume, right? You got Nick Claxton, Jeff Green, you got DeAndre Jordan, you have Blake Griffin, right? You got a lot of players that can still make up for the offense that you may lose in James Harden. It's just you may be at a lower level. My biggest concern for them just comes down to team chemistry with the big three, right? If all three of them are healthy at the same time during the postseason, are they going to work well together? Is it going to be good? Is the locker room not going to get heated if they start to have bad plays because they've only played 6 games together, or if not less or more? It's just a bit scary, right? And it's also a bit worrisome if they make it to the finals, but they only have 2 of their 3 superstars, right? There's a lot of questions with this team, to say the least. There's a lot of questions when they get deeper into the playoffs. If they have guys that are injured or have to sit out, it's just
who in the East poses them. Who gives them trouble in the East? What team matches up that would really throw them for fits?
If a player returns from injury, this is gonna be shocking. The Miami Heat. If Victor Oladipo can come back healthy by the time that they match up, or by the time they have a chance to match up, the Heat pose the biggest threat because they are the only team that has 3 defensive guys that can guard all 3 of their best players. You throw Jimmy Butler and Victor Oladipo on Kyrie and Harden, and then you put Bam Adebayo on KD if you want to run a man-to-man offense. And if you want to run a zone, they've got enough bench defensive pieces with Andre Iguodala. They have Precious Achiuwa, who's a pretty good defensive player, whether he's a 4 or a 5. KZ Okpala is 50-50. He's a very raw prospect, but he plays some solid defense. And I mean, at the point guard position or at the guard slots, they don't exactly have a ton of defense, I will say, but they still have enough guys to run a very good defensive scheme. I think that defensively, they pose the biggest threat. The offense will be the biggest question, but they have a lot of depth. If they want to run a 10-man rotation, they might be able to kill them off the bench, and that's what they do to win, right? It's gonna be pretty a pretty fun season.
And guys, let me contextualize that. Let me contextualize that for our new listeners. Obviously, Kyrie, KD, Harden are going to get their points. What the Heat do really well is, and what you learn about defense the more you watch, it's not about stopping the best players on the other team. It's about throwing different matchups where they have to figure it out, right? You throw a small, quick guard on Kyrie, and then the next play you throw Jimmy Butler on. Right now he has to figure it out. He has to play a little bit of chess. And that's the kind of thing that really good teams, really good organizations plan for, especially in the playoffs, because you're never going to stop the best guy. Yep. But if you could make the guy problem solve, make him think, wow, I just had a little guy on me. Now I have a taller guy. You have to problem solve, right? You put Jimmy Butler on Durant, and then next play you put Bam on Durant. That kind of little stuff like that is what Erik Spoelstra and the Heat have always been good at. I agree. That'll be a really fun matchup. I'm so excited for the playoffs, man.
Yes, I am too.
This bubble time is going to be fascinating. Last thing, Lakers.
Yeah.
I can't figure this team out. I don't think anyone can. I want to say that this is a team of championship pedigree, right? I want to say this is a team of veteran leaders, of winners. But I've been disappointed watching them fold to teams that I'm not saying that they necessarily should win without LeBron and AD. But when you see a team that can contend without their 2 best guys, so that when their 2 best guys come back, it's kind of like they lift the level up somewhere that they started. I haven't seen a lot of grit from this Lakers team. I
think they were 7-10 without LeBron and AD, and I'd personally expect them to be at least slightly over 500. So having them below 500 is a bit upsetting, to say the least, but I do agree. This team is a bit disappointing without the 2 of them. I will say, when you don't have your 2 superstars on the roster, it's a little bit harder to run your offense at a high level. But it is disappointing, to say the least. My biggest question is, this team could slip down to the 6th seed, the 7th seed, or the 8th seed, because it's very close. We just mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. They could slip down because LeBron is still expected to be out for another 7 to 10 days, if not longer. That was the fastest turnaround time for him. Time for those of us that
he's the same as James Harden, right? May 10th is kind of May 5th through May 10th.
Their hope, yeah, exactly. It's going to be later in the regular season, and this team could slip down. What I wonder is, because it's kind of close at the top of the Western Conference, do teams like the Jazz or the Suns or the Clippers or whoever's sitting close to the top, do they purposely try to lose games to avoid a first-round matchup with LeBron and Anthony Davis and the rest of the Lakers squad? I would say yes, personally.
I would
think
say
that
no.
they do.
I never. Losing is a habit, Conrad, and we don't allow losing on Luka Nation Network. We're a team of winners, we play anyone who's in front of us. But let me tell you, so this is who's coming up for them. They have the Magic. So this is the Lakers' remaining schedule.
Okay.
Lakers are sitting at 35, 20, and 25, fifth in the West. So next they're playing the Magic tonight, Wizards Wednesday, Kings Friday. That's a pretty nice schedule. That's a nice week for them. They're vacationing this week. Then they have the Raptors on Sunday, easy. And then we got Nuggets, Clippers, Trailblazers, Suns, Knicks. That's a little bit of a tough stretch, but winnable. And you also don't know who's going to be injured, who's going to be resting. This Nuggets team has looked meh since
they've been 50-50 since his injury, I'll admit.
Yep. Even though Michael Porter Jr. is insanely efficient.
39 points, baby. Career
then
high.
We got the Suns, Knicks, Rockets, Pacers, Pelicans to close out the season. So not the toughest schedule. Definitely something to be able to, something to work with. I think what's cool about the end of this year is it's very much up for grabs. It's very much up for grabs. Would I be surprised if I saw the Nets Lakers? No, I wouldn't be in the finals. But would I also be surprised if those two teams got knocked out before they even reached their conference finals? I've seen crazier things happen, and there's a ton of injuries on both sides, and you can't control injuries. And the thing with injuries is somehow when you have kind of a nagging injury, you keep getting injured because you can't play yourself into form. And playing yourself into form in the playoffs is even more challenging because it's a much more physical game.
Yep.
So there's a lot of question marks. Wrap it up, Conrad. This is perfect. 30 minutes. We do this weekly. This is so much fun. Wrap us.
Man, I'm not completely sure how to wrap it. Here's how I'll wrap it up because you just kind of you have a good way to wrap this up. You mentioned so yourself that there's a lot of questions with the Lakers, and I agree. But there's also a lot of questions with a lot of teams around the league. You also said so yourself. Very even matchups. This is kind of the most crazy playoffs that we've ever seen, or we potentially ever will see. I'm excited for playoff basketball, and I know you are too. I wouldn't be shocked if 90% of the playoffs was like all upsets. And this is like the only year I would confidently say that. Like, I'm not expecting it, but if it were to happen, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, mind blown. I'd be like, kind of crazy that we're seeing this, but it's very even matchups. So here's how I'll end it. For Luka Nation, buckle up, get ready for playoff basketball. It's gonna be exciting. I can't wait, and I know you can't either. Andrew, thank you for hosting us episode 3 of Scouts. I had a blast, and I hope you did too.